I've never really believed in true evil. At least not until that night in the cabin. The night we found the book. Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead. Inked in blood and bound in human flesh, the book holds the power to resurrect demons and summon the powers of darkness. Professor Raymond Noby brought the Necronomicon to this quiet place years ago to study the book, to unlock its secrets. He was never seen again. When we read it, we awoke something in the woods. A dark, infectious evil as old as time. It got into my hand and it went bad, so I cut it off. It got to the others too, twisting them, changing them. They became something less than human.
Once upon a time, a trio of filmmaking geeks from Michigan wanted to break into the movie business. They did so by making the ultimate experience in grueling terror. I'm of course referring to The Evil Dead. What this little horror film lacked in budget, it made up for with gruesome gore and creative filmmaking.
Oh, you bastards! Why are you torturing me like this? Why?
The Evil Dead was a minor success, but it was Evil Dead 2 that defined the series. Part Splatterfest, part Three Stooges homage, Evil Dead 2 saw Sam Raimi up his directing game, while Bruce Campbell upped his chin game. Ash Williams, the sole survivor of the last film, evolved from a cowardly wimp into a badass. Armed with a chainsaw arm and a boomstick, Ash isn't afraid to kick some demonic ass if it means saving the world from the horrors of the Necronomicon.
Workshed.
By the time Army of Darkness was released, Evil Dead was a horror household name. And what do you do when something is popular? Merchandise it.
Seems fairly obvious.
There's been shirts, comics, copious amounts of DVDs and Blu-rays, and of course, video games. The first stab came in 1984 with The Evil Dead on Commodore 64. This pre-survival horror title starred the hapless Ash Williams and tasked players with surviving the night. You boarded up windows and fought monsters while keeping your energy up. It was short, it was primitive, it was the first Evil Dead game.
Does that sound bye?
In late 1999, THQ signed a deal with Sam Raimi's company, Renaissance Pictures, to produce new Evil Dead games up until 2005. The first title to come from this deal was Evil Dead Hail to the King. Developed by Heavy Iron Studios, this is a Resident Evil clone. It's got tank controls, spooky pre-rendered backgrounds, and limited inventory, but with the blocky chin of Bruce Campbell.
Groovy.
A Resident Evil-inspired Evil Dead game sounds groovy, but it failed to make a splash when it was released in 2000. Critics slammed the game for its clunky gameplay and cheap difficulty.
Now it's locked.
This didn't deter THQ, who pushed on with the next game, Evil Dead: A Fistful of Boomstick. Ash Williams is back, but this time he's on the 6th generation and armed with the new developer, VIS Entertainment. A Fistful of Boomstick ditched the survival horror in favor of an action-adventure experience. Instead of fighting a few demons, you mowed down scores of them using an ever-expanding arsenal.
Cool.
It was a step up from Hail to the King, but it wasn't a huge success either. THQ had 2 strikes against them, and they badly needed a hit. So they got their act together and put on their best pair of cranky pants.
Cranky Pants Games.
Who's the frickin' genius who came up with that name?
In the early 2000s, a small group of ex-EA Seattle devs formed a startup studio. The team needed a name and needed it fast. While waiting for a flight, a frustrated David Bollison met Ryan Woodland at the airport. When Ryan realized David looked a bit angry, he asked him what was wrong. David explained before apologizing, saying he was acting like a bunch of cranky pants. Thus, Cranky Pants Games was born. The early days of Cranky Pants were defined by GameCube ports of Red Faction 2 and Summoner 2. Cranky Pants was looking to make their first real title and found out THQ owned the rights to Evil Dead. There was another THQ studio who had already done an Evil Dead game. I think they had had some success. When we formed the studio, we did a bunch of ports to get the studio going. We ported Red Faction 2, we ported Summoner 2. We started discussing what our first studio title was going to be, and the Evil Dead franchise was available. It seemed like the best idea rather than starting with a new franchise. We had done Summoner and Red Faction and were looking around for work. We considered some stuff like HBO's Rome until we learned THQ had the rights to Evil Dead. They haven't found a studio to do a new one yet, so they chose us to do it.
Peachy.
They got the green light, now they needed to figure out what the game would be. The team considered several ideas, including a 2.5D brawler that had an overworld-underworld setting. They eventually decided on a hack and slash. Like Hail to the King before, Regeneration took its inspiration from a popular Capcom franchise, Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry was big at the time, and many of us in the studio were big fans. That was certainly an inspiration. Ash being equipped with a chainsaw and a shotgun in each hand lent itself to the kind of over-the-top gore that permeated the franchise.
Yeah, baby. Sing for the king.
The team wanted to give the gameplay an extra bit of flavor and do something the series had never done before. What was this bold, inspiring decision? A sidekick. A foul-mouthed, tiny sidekick both Ash and the player would hate to love. Sam.
Smell the fresh air!
Sam's creation, as Ryan Woodland put it, was the result of one too many beers. So you have a bunch of guys making a horror game, and there's all these zombie-ish kind of characters, the Deadites. You wanted to do something different. I don't know who, but someone suggested the idea of doing a midget. You know, it probably wasn't politically correct at the time, but then the Evil Dead franchise is not necessarily politically correct.
You know, I bet you'd be some kind of a knockout if you traded in the granny wear for thigh-high stockings and a bra that pushed up your yams.
We wanted a way to add variety to the gameplay, and when Ted Raimi was cast, it was obvious we had to expand the role. When our studio head came back from a meeting with the THQ execs, he gave me 2 directives on the game to design. First, it had to be Evil Dead. Second, it had to have a sidekick. Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, etc. all had made a mark on the industry at the time, and he was a fan. Our first thoughts in design were around how much of a pain it would be to program sidekick AI, and sidekicks can be annoying. We decided to embrace the annoying, leveraging the IP's concept of I live again, and make an annoying sidekick you can enjoy killing if he ever got in your way.
Okay, bad first impression.
Designing Sam was a challenge for the team. He had to be annoying but useful. They also wanted segments where Ash escorted Sam and knew the dangers that came with giving players protection missions. Those fears were mitigated when John Knowles joined the team. The former LucasArts developer helped them nail down Sam. They knew they always wanted to kick the little guy, but there hadn't been any deep thought into the mechanics of it. You want to kick him, but you don't want him to get stuck. The result of our brainstorms was he should be on demand. So alright, how do we do that? That led to some ideas like, well, he's already dead, so anytime he dies, he comes up through the ground right next to your feet, because then you don't have to wait for him to navigate. That was a big problem trying to figure out how he would navigate to wherever the player is. Forget the navigation, just spawn him right in front of you. Target him to kick is in front of you, or freely kick him around. It made the combat a lot of fun, I thought. You could focus on your chainsaw boomstick combos and let Sam run off and do his bit. If he dies, he's feisty and pissed off, but he'll come back up again.
What the hell are you trying to pull?
You might want to duck next time.
When you're making a game, especially an Evil Dead game, you want to make sure it's got a strong visual design. Jeff Haney, the art director, was responsible for making sure the art team kept true to the movies while expanding upon the mythos in interesting, creative ways. My responsibility was to design the look and feel, to guide that all the way to final where it's a working model in the game. With the Evil Dead franchise, you had this weird blend, or rather I should say chemistry, of almost comical and almost horror. We wanted something humorous, which is why we agreed as a team to give Ash a sidekick. Plus, we wanted to do something different. More challenging for the art team was nailing Sam and Ash. I did some early concepts of Sam, and they were too serious, not comical enough. Then we had our straight Deadite characters. Those were straight horror. The other thing is when you're working with a game designer, the designer designs the gameplay. Because this was a brawler, Andy designed certain kinds of moves and combos. So he had to think about how to design a character to fit those kinds of moves. That helped guide the design of the character. There's a lot to this, making sure that everything works. Once you design the character and the animator builds it, you then test the character out and refine it.
Such craftsmanship. So diabolically beautiful.
The art team designed everything, then passed their work to the animators for them to create. Jeff not only made sure his team stayed on track, but worked with the leads and the other departments to ensure everything was in sync. To answer your question, it's the story and gameplay. Those two were the most important things. The other is the character lineup. When you see a character in a scene, how do you distinguish it from another character?
Hello? I hate to interrupt your beauty sleep, lady.
Evil Dead Regeneration's story doesn't pick up from a fistful of boomsticks cliffhanger. Instead of guiding Ash through feudal Japan, it's a what if that posits the question, what if Army of Darkness never happened? Regeneration starts with Ash defending himself against the invading Deadites, but instead of going back in time to the medieval dead, he's arrested and committed to Sunny Meadows Asylum. Ash's lawyer Sally intends to prove her client's innocence by acquiring Professor Nobi's diary. Little do they know that deep in the bowels of the institution, the founder of the asylum, Dr. Reinhardt, has the Necronomicon and is conducting experiments with it. One botched reading later, and all hell breaks loose. Ash reclaims his belongings and with Sam's help, sets out to stop Reinhardt for good.
All right, we go. But if you get all deadite on me, even for a second, I'll carve you up like a Christmas goose. You got that, Stubby?
The decision to make Regeneration a what if was because of Fistful's less than stellar success, and the team's desire to tell a new story. Andy Beaudoin wrote the story and pitched it to Sam Raimi to get his approval. We met with Sam Raimi twice, once to pitch the concept and another to provide an overview of the script. It was surreal to be talking to Sam in his office on the Spider-Man 2 set and pitching him a script I wrote for his IP.
All right, enough already. It's time to give Junior his bottle.
An Evil Dead project isn't complete without Bruce Campbell. He once again stepped behind the mic to voice Ash, with Sam's younger brother Ted Raimi voicing the Undying Dwarf. They wanted Sam to be this little, foul-mouthed, irritating character. They just let Ted go off, saying whatever foul-mouthed stuff he wanted to say. When those guys came back from the recording session, they played some of it, and it was incredible. It was a real funny moment. It made the character, in my opinion.
Well, look on the bright side. No more scalpage.
Evil Dead Regeneration was Cranky Pan's first major title. Everyone was excited and determined to make the best game possible. Each developer I spoke with had their own personal highlights. I learned a tremendous amount. It was a challenging project, largely due to learning to lead design while forming a team, building an engine, and building a game on a small budget by today's standards. In the end, I think we made a fun, delightful little game that did justice to the IP and brought in some new ideas.
Hey, what I lack in precision to make up for in possess.
There were a lot of different ones, but I think one of the funny ones was when we were talking about doing the voiceover for Sam. Sam Raimi was like, "Why'd you guys name the midget Sam? Did you name him after me?" And we didn't. It's not like we were sitting around like, "Oh, we're working with Sam Raimi, so we should name him Sam." That was one of the highlights. Probably the other was working with the team. We did some incredible work on the project.
Wonderful.
Once we were all confident that we got the sidekick down, we put together a cool demo. It was a cool highlight seeing all the mechanics strung together. That was a stressful thing for the team because they weren't sure we could pull the sidekick stuff off.
Please, Doctor, this is madness!
Madness is the key to genius, Miss Pauline.
As exciting as it was, Cranky Pants faced several challenges. Some were technical, others corporate. They may have been using a middleware engine, but there were several hurdles to overcome just to get everything up and running. I don't know how much you know about game production, but we were developing an engine. We were developing the technology. When you're wanting to design a level and test the gameplay, where you're waiting on the engineer to get their work done, it's time consuming. They were under a deadline. They had to work on those tools, so the artists didn't have a lot to work with. We couldn't see our work in the game.
Well, ain't this a kick in the pants?
For Andy, it was a challenge for him because he couldn't test a lot of the gameplay. That's why we couldn't do a lot of testing until later in development. For Ryan Woodland, the most challenging part of the game was his role. As the senior software engineer, he'd arrive in the morning, sit around the office while everyone else worked, then at night do his work, then go home before doing it all again a few hours later.
Thanks for the lift, jerk.
THQ didn't know what to do with the game. They didn't know how to market it, which affected its release. They thought marketing it towards a hardcore audience was the way to go, when the team thought they should have played up the campy aspect. Cranky Pants finished Regeneration ahead of schedule, but rather than using those remaining months to polish it, THQ sat on it before releasing it to minimal fanfare. We went in idealistic. A lot of us had worked at EA and Nintendo, so we had the talent, we had the ambition, but as we learned making Evil Dead, it's not about taking your time, it's about pleasing the shareholders.
You know your shoelace is untied.
As with all games, Evil Dead Regeneration toyed with several concepts during development. Ash's combat had more grapple-based attacks and intricate animations, but the former was cut and the latter was simplified. The game went under the title of Evil Dead Shocked and Loaded, which the team thought was better fitting than the generic Regeneration subtitle THQ went with. Jeff Haney created two different box arts for the game, one which was an elaborate painting inspired by Army of Darkness, and the other a stylish but safe variant. Guess which one THQ used?
No offense, Professor, but how do I put this? You're a big useless ghost head.
Perhaps the biggest crime was cutting the delta. Players were going to get behind the wheel of the classic, until they realized how much work it'd take. They had some fun ideas to take the iconic car and run it through a swamp with big spinning blades on it. That sounded like a lot of fun, but it was the right call. We had ideas for him to do some driving. The challenge, and this was something we learned on Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, is that it's a whole nother sequence of technology, and the art for a level like that is a challenge because you have a level that's streaming and loading. You must be able to drop things out, load things in seamlessly to where the player doesn't notice. It's different when you're on foot and running around the level because you can load things in at a slower pace. I think if the game had done well enough for a sequel, we could have added it in.
You've both come such an awfully long way to die!
Evil Dead Regeneration released on September 13, 2005 to mixed reviews. Critics praised the game for its faithfulness to the source material, but criticized the hack-and-slash gameplay for not being in-depth enough. It didn't light up the sales charts either, despite selling for the amazing price of $20.
You certainly have a chubby for trash, huh?
The fact the game shipped with bugs across each platform didn't help things either. The PC version suffered from a game-breaking crash that was eventually patched, while the PS2 version lacks the dynamic blood tech the other versions had.
Nice park job, Runt.
Although the team was happy with what they had made, they were disappointed with its lackluster response. The team would have loved a higher Metacritic score, but in general folks enjoyed it and we knew the game had its flaws. However, in retrospect, it was a low-budget game based on a low-budget film, and at the time, it was the highest rated of the series. We came close, but due to THQ sitting on the game, instead of letting us use those extra months to polish it, it didn't release in the state it should have.
Reality check, twerp. I'm not your pal.
I think for a lot of the folks who had never worked on a game before, it was hard. But for the ones who had, it wasn't a huge surprise. Quite a few of my Star Wars games have landed in that area. You get that one review that's like an 8.5, and then come all the 5s and 6s. I think that's always tough. It was a good looking game. It was fun to play. I can't think what their biggest critiques were other than it was a bit repetitive. Evil Dead has never been at the forefront of the mainstream pop culture mindset. I know it's niche, but it's so much fun.
I mean, sure, she's a little uptight and square, but I think there's something freaky-deaky going on there too, you know what I'm saying?
Evil Dead Regeneration is often considered the best of the THQ Evil Dead titles. Hail to the King had a great concept, but a shitty execution. A Fistful of Boomstick was a step up, but it was a confusing clusterfuck where half the time you didn't know where the hell to go. Evil Dead Regeneration hits that sweet spot. It's a bit jank, but it nails the source material, and more importantly, it is fun to play. You can tell Cranky Pants were huge fans and did their best to capture the spirit. It's the little things, like how the cutscenes emulate Sam Raimi's camera work, or Bruce Campbell's snark that shows the team did their homework.
Just like the one in my dreams. Where have you been all my life?
I love the Ash-Sam dynamic. Ash's cockiness bounces off Sam's buffoonery. Sam in general is a scene stealer. He's the bastard son of Joe Pesci and Jerry Lewis. They lean into the fact he's obnoxious, but not to the point it makes you want to hit the mute button. I think it works because his annoyance is helpful. He's unkillable, so he goes through all the brutal shit but comes back like it's nothing.
Who's the man now, Ash?
Regeneration is fun to play thanks to the smooth controls. It's easy to bounce between enemies and attacks. The surprisingly varied move list gives Ash more ways to kill besides slicing and shooting. You can rev up the chainsaw to launch an enemy or hack them to bits while they're down. The finishers let you do quick work and never get old. The bits where you possess Sam are short but sweet. They feel like something out of the mascot platformer days, what with the heavy emphasis on platforming and comical depths. It's a shame there aren't more Sam segments, but the ones we get are enjoyable.
Operation Fan is a done frickin' deal. Come on, Ash, tell me, who's your dad?
Regeneration comes close to greatness, but much like Ash's right arm, it's missing something essential.
Reality check. Who you calling Stubby? Stubby?
The game controls well, but the arsenal lacks variety. For Ash's left hand, he gets a pistol, a shotgun, and a grenade launcher. His right arm gets the chainsaw, a harpoon gun, and a flamethrower. It keeps things focused, yes, but it limits the number of options at your disposal. All the firearms have infinite ammo, which is fine, but I think an extra weapon or two could have staved off repetition. Every enemy can be defeated with the chainsaw boomstick combo, and if you want to trivialize fights, spam the harpoon. The boss fights are underwhelming. Every fight boils down to dodging their attacks, then kicking Sam, or using a particular weapon when they're vulnerable. I'm not joking when I say one boss can be beaten in less than 2 minutes.
Well, if it isn't the one that got away.
Evil Dead Regeneration is like the first Evil Dead, short on polish, heavy on creativity. This was a game made by a team who loved the source material. Even when the gameplay isn't the best, the passion Cranky Pants brings to it shines through. If you like your horror games a bit schlocky, Regeneration scratches that itch.
Sally, I fought some crazy odds and came a very long way to tell you something.
Stupid mad scientist.
Yes?
I just wanted to, well, apologize for the fashion advice I gave you back at Sunny Meadows.
How about
Evil Dead Regeneration ends on a cliffhanger, but Cranky Pants never planned on continuing Ash and Sam's adventures. There were ideas, but that's all they were, ideas. THQ approached Cranky Pants about making a game based on The Sopranos or Rome, the former of which they considered using the Saints Row engine for. Instead, Cranky Pants Games was tasked with making Destroy All Humans Path of the Furon, and we all know how that turned out. Interestingly, Sam was going to appear in Path of the Furon as a downloadable character, but due to the game's rocky development, it never happened. Sam shall and will forever be known as that little person from that Evil Dead game.
we made a hell of a duo, didn't we? Partner.
THQ's Evil Dead games were made during a quiet period in the franchise's history. Sam Raimi had become one of the biggest names in Hollywood, and Bruce Campbell solidified his reputation as the king of the chins. As far as fans were concerned, Army of Darkness was the last we'd see of the franchise.
The truth to the rumor of Evil Dead 4. Well, the real trick there is to call Sam Raimi on the phone and convince him to do Evil Dead 4 instead of Spider-Man 2.
If the 2000s was the Dark Ages, then the 2010s was the franchise's renaissance. Evil Dead made a comeback with the Fede Alvarez remake and the excellent Ash vs. Evil Dead. We finally got a new Evil Dead game with 2022's creatively titled Evil Dead: The Game. It was fun, for about an hour. but if anything, it made fans yearn for the days of the THQ titles of old. They weren't perfect, but they scratched an itch.
Well, looky here.
For the developers, Evil Dead Regeneration was a project that, despite its many bumps, was fun to make. We tried to embody the spirit of the movies the best we could. I don't consider it a disappointment, but we could have made something better with more time and resources. I learned how to lead with confidence, while learning I didn't have to have all the answers. As I was new to both the genre and design leadership, I felt the need to have a complete design of everything rather than leveraging the team to get the best design. I still seek to provide a clear vision to the team, but I try to do so in partnership with the team and by leveraging their strengths.
Alright, I get it. You kill Deadites, absorb their evil mojo, unleash badass, kick major ass. Makes perfect sense to me.
Like I said, I came in late. Even though I had the studio creative director role, I felt my duty was to assist them with something they had already created. So the pressure wasn't on me being the stakeholder, being the vision holder, it was just trying to solve specific problems. It reminded me of the last couple of projects I did which were big cross-development teams. For me, it was a fun reminder of solving moment-to-moment gameplay issues in a hands-on way with a creative team. It was fun. I got to work on Evil Dead, which was great. I loved the series when it came out. It was a big deal back then. It was also a very different game compared to what I had worked on. It was violent, whereas all the stuff I did with Star Wars was non-violent to a certain degree. There's no blood, no dismemberment in Star Wars, so it was fun to make a lighthearted romp that was kind of gross.
Listen up, Shake and Bake. I eat evil for breakfast and danger for dinner, so spread the word. Ash is back in business.
This is the complete history of Evil Dead Regeneration. I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who watched the video, and to the developers I interviewed for taking the time to dig up some memories on a 20-year-old Evil Dead game. Thank you for watching.
Join us